What's going on, guys? I haven't talked about a retro console, a retro handheld in some time, so I thought it would be fun to take a look at a brand new retro handheld called the Anbernic RG35XX H. The H is very important. Presumably it means horizontal. Now, you guys may remember I've covered the RG35XX quite a bit. Maybe like a year or so ago. Really enjoyed that handheld. This thing is basically a slightly more powerful version of that, but in a horizontal form factor. And you have a couple of joysticks there, which is pretty slick. You can see $89.99 is the current asking price for this handheld. If we scroll down here really quickly, we'll take a look at some of the specs. So it is a 3.5-inch IPS display, 640 by 480 at that size. That's going to be totally fine. Apparently, it does have support for Wi-Fi, Bluetooth controllers. There's an HDMI port to computers, TVs, monitors, and projectors. There is also a vibration motor and what they're calling high-fidelity speakers. We'll take a look at that here in a little bit. They're also saying that moonlight streaming is a thing, so I'll have to see if that's actually true or not. I've seen that listed before on handhelds like this, and that it just never really has worked for me, so maybe we'll try that as well. Some further specifications here. We have an H700 quad-core processor and a dual-core GPU and 1 gig of RAM. Before I go any further, I want to say thanks to Mech DIY for sending this handheld over for me to review, and with that sort of introing out of the way, let's unbox it. Alright guys, the RG35XX H. I can already tell you that the box is smaller than I was expecting, which means that the device is going to be smaller than I was expecting as well, and that's a good thing. I want these things to be tiny, and it appears as though I'm going to get my wish. Let's set this aside. We'll contain our excitement for a moment to see what else is in here. A screen protector. That's just lovely, right? Just pack in a screen protector. I'm guessing that's just an empty box. I don't think there's anything in there. Or no, maybe there actually is. Yeah, great. USB-C cable. USB-A to C. That is very useful. I don't know why I thought it was just going to be an empty box. I mean, come on. Of course they're going to give us something. Let's set this out of the way, and let's slide this out of its plastic. Guys, look at this thing. Come on. How cool is this? I absolutely love it. I love it already. I haven't even used it, and I absolutely love it already. Let's get a look at these buttons here. So definitely pretty clicky. Not too bad at all. D-pad. It's a nice balance between mushy and clicky. See, these buttons, that's super clicky. Not a whole lot going on for the shake test. How about the joysticks? They are very small. Not a whole lot of travel. We'll have to check that out and see what's going on there. We have a couple of micro SD cards, probably operating system, and then there's probably ROMs on the other one. Some little rubberized grips on the back too. Power, and then there's a little R button. Not sure what that's going to be. Volume on the other side. And then there's an F button on top, as well as video out. Audio out, OTG, OTG2, a lot of stuff going on here on this thing. Let's see if we can power it up. And I also want to, I want you to understand how small this thing is really quickly. All right, I ran and I grabbed a few things that are very dusty. Here is the RG35XX, which I said I really liked. It's really small. Here is the Retroid Pocket Flip, which absolutely will dwarf this thing, especially when you open it. You see the size difference of the screen. The screen's the size of the entire device, right? This thing is very cool. I like how small this is. Here's a PSP Go. It's like almost PSP Go sized, which is absolutely awesome. Lots of sounds on the menu. This is, I believe, very similar to, if not the exact same stock OS as what was on the RG35XX, which makes me wonder if, what was it, Garlic OS? Onion OS? Garlic? I don't remember which one was which, but it makes me wonder if that's going to be a thing. Game rooms. External card, built-in card. Let's go to external card, and it looks like they've loaded a fair amount of games on here. Let's go into GBA. Let's go into Vice City Stories. Can this thing run Vice City Stories? If it can run this at a reasonable rate. Man, listen to the speakers. Hey, that ain't bad. That is not bad at all. Guys, okay, a little bit of a slowdown there. But this is running really well. So let's take a little bit of a closer look here at Vice City Stories. And my initial impressions, I think, were a little bit better than how things are actually ending up being. Let me actually get out here into the open part of this world, and you'll see what I mean. I've actually dropped some settings down. I'm running at a native resolution now instead of the 2x, which is where it actually starts. And it's interesting because things are going really, really well here at first, but then when you get into certain areas, there is a substantial amount of slowdown that can start to happen. And actually right now you can see we're running 30 FPS and things are looking pretty good. There we go. There's some of that pretty major stutter that happens. And like I said, I spent a decent amount of time trying to kind of address this a little bit. Let's zoom in so you can really get a good look at this. I jumped into the settings, which you can get into by pressing that function key up top. And I tried changing a lot of different things. Now we're running at 20 FPS. Let's turn up the volume. Running slowly. Yep. So that's the kind of thing that we're dealing with when the frame rate drops. So let's jump in and we'll take its advice because it's saying, you know, hey, try using frame skip. So we'll turn frame skipping on. We'll throw it on to 2 and let's jump back out of that. And you can see that's not helping at all. In fact, that makes it considerably worse. So unfortunately, PSP is one of those things that, man, it started off so strong, but once I got out of that area, this is going to be one of those systems where most games are probably just not quite going to be playable. 2D games, more simple games, yeah, absolutely. Games like this that are quite large, open world games like this, probably not going to work out all that well. I will say changing it from 2 frame skip to 2% of frames, it doesn't look good. Like it feels very kind of juddery because it's running at 15 FPS and then just sort of skipping frames. If you really wanted to play these games, this would probably be the way to do it. But it's not nearly as smooth and nice of an experience as I think what I would want. But I guess technically it would be doable. So let's actually kind of double back and take a closer look at this operating system, and maybe we can kind of zoom in a little bit further here as well while we are doing this. There's a couple of things that people might not like immediately understand. So you have game rooms and then you have RA games. And so there's a reason why you would use both of these. So you may look at this and see, okay, you're picking between your cards, you're picking a game in a system and you're launching it, and then you can come over here and then it's basically the same thing, but they're organized differently. So like, what's the difference here? Well, basically, if you launch it under RA game, it's going to launch it using RetroArch, and that is going to potentially be a better solution for you. Most of the time, you're going to want to launch games under RetroArch. I think there's only a couple of different systems I've run into, like PSP, where I think you're probably better off launching it through that system. I know that's kind of weird, but just kind of get used to launching stuff through RetroArch instead. You've also got a favorites section. So like, let's say there is a particular game that you just really enjoy. Actually, we'll do 2 things here. So let's go over to search, because this is somewhat useful as well. Let's say you're looking for Pokemon games that are on here. Well, you can search for that, and then you can use this D-pad left and right to skip whole pages. And let's pick a game here. Let's go to Pokemon Blue version and hit the start key, and that's going to mark it as a favorite. That should let you get into these systems a little bit faster. If you hit the function key while you're on the UI, it'll actually jump you into your settings where you can change the backlight level, which it defaults to 4. Honestly, that's probably about a good spot for it to be. Date and time, RetroArch settings, which if you don't know much about RetroArch, you probably should not be jumping or digging into these settings very far. Under network settings, you can connect to Wi-Fi and you can connect to Bluetooth. Although when you connect a Bluetooth controller to this thing, it will default as the number 2 controller. You can configure things in RetroArch, but it's not super easy. Not great. Really only going to be useful maybe if you plug it into a television, hand your friend a controller, and you use this as your controller. You could potentially do that. I do want to quickly connect to Wi-Fi, and let's see if I can get the Moonlight thing to work. All right, kind of surprisingly, this appears to have worked. We're going to hit the connect button. and we'll see what happens here. If you don't know, Moonlight is basically this piece of software where if you have an NVIDIA GPU, you can stream games from your computer. I can hear my computer fighting in the background. Stream it from the computer to a device like this, and I'm waiting for something to pop up on the screen here. Like I said, my computer has fired up Steam as if this is functioning. I just tried manually starting a game on my computer and nothing is happening here. So this appears to be just as broken as I thought it would be. And in fact, I may just be totally frozen at this point. So that's cool. Back in those settings, there are a few more things that you can do. So you can turn that button sound off like I did because it was very, very annoying. You can also change the background image between these different little presets. Not a whole lot to choose from there. I'm just gonna go with black, that's fine. And you can also change the icons to be these different sort of icon packs. We'll just go with that one, that's fine as well. So before we jump into any more game testing, I gotta get my games that I want on here and probably delete a bunch of games that I'm just never ever gonna play and there's really no value in testing. So hitting the power button is actually just a sleep thing. You can see that that light is still on, and if you leave it just sleeping, you will drain your battery quite a bit faster. And for the purposes of this video, what we're gonna actually need to do is fully shut it down to take these SD cards out. It says goodbye, very blown out there, but we gotta wait for this thing to shut off. And then we have two SD cards here. There's a TF1 internal, it says INT, and then TF2 /EXT. So I'm gonna actually check and see what is on both of them. I'm curious to see how it's laid out. So let's pop out the internal one first. It says it's a 64 gig card. At least that's what was sent to me. We're going to put it into a card reader. And as you can see, it said it was a 64 gig card, but it's only got 45.9 reading there. And that is because this is definitely, well, it's either a card that's lying about its size, or that is the card that the operating system is actually on. And there are partitions there only allowing me to see that amount of space. Let's take a look here at disk management if this will ever load, and we'll see exactly how it's kind of laid out. I'm just curious. Yeah, so there you go. So there's 46 that's accessible. The rest of this is stuff that is just the operating system, so good to know. Let's go into ROMs here, and it looks like everything just kind of has a folder, and there are quite a few ROMs actually on this card. So I'm going to take a second, and I'm going to clean this up. It's going to be really straightforward, guys. If you've got a GBA ROM, there's a folder that says GBA. Drop it on there, and it will be on your device. Anything you don't want, you can delete it. When that's done, we'll take a look at the other card and see what's on there as well. So I've finished cleaning it up, and a couple of things that I want to quickly point out is that they had zero N64 ROMs on here. So I threw a whole bunch on there to test, and they also had no games that had the word Mario in them. So I was forced to likewise bring my own over, which if I scroll down, there are mine. They're in a zip file. I'm assuming that's not going to be a problem. Let's back out here. We're going to put this SD card back in, and I'm curious what is even on the other card, because it seemed like everything was on this one 64 gig card. So what is on, this is a 128 gig card. What is on here? It is almost completely full. So what is it? Is it just the same? It looks like it's almost the same thing. By the way, it's made my file browser just go absolutely mad. But this is all the stuff that I just deleted. But then like maybe more stuff. I don't really understand why everything's like duplicated onto this other card. But it looks like there are a few extra games over here. Loco Roco was not on the other one. So they've got two cards in here. Almost all of it are duplicates, but they've added a few more games. So let me clean this up too, I guess. And honestly, there's probably not anything on here that I can't move to the other card if need be. Yeah, kind of weird. Okay, super weird. But it definitely was the case that there were some games that were on the other card that were not on the first card. So I'm assuming the search function probably searches both. So that's probably the way that you want to go. It's just where they had them duplicated. There's a lot of wasted space there. Everything I'm going to play is on the one card. So we're going to see what happens now. I don't even have the other card plugged in. And theoretically, it should boot up and it should run just fine with that one card. And then this extra card will just be extra. I don't really need another 128 gigs for a bunch of retro games that all the ones I ever am going to play are already on here. This takes round about 20 seconds or so to boot up, as you can see. So let's switch back to the overhead camera and we will see what the games are actually like. Let's go over to RetroArch Games, and let's start off with something that is near and dear to my heart, the original Game Boy. And these are all going to run absolutely fine. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these sort of older games because they're going to be great. But I do want to see kind of how it handles coloration and things like that, because obviously Game Boy games were in black and white, but if you put them into the same cartridge, boy, that is just awesome. Let's turn that volume down a little bit just so we can hear ourselves. Now, when you put one of these cartridges into a Game Boy Color, you would get colorization. So let's see if we can go into our settings here, options, GB colorization. So let's go with internal, and this should, yes, that is exactly what that should look like. That is awesome. Okay, so that is what I wanted to see. And what I just discovered is the shoulder buttons will actually take you through different colorizations. How good is that? That is awesome. And then this trigger will fast forward, allowing you to kind of get through things a little bit more quickly. So yeah, Game Boy, I think, is going to be an absolute win. Of course, Game Boy Color, Game Gear, all these things are going to be just fine. Let's try something a bit more challenging. Let's go into Nintendo DS, and we are going to see if Mario Kart is doable on here. Now, obviously, this is a situation where it's a dual screen device. We have one screen, one of them's a touch screen. So we have a little pin floating around down there, and that's going to be how we're going to control things. Wonder what key actually does. Okay, so the R3 there is actually letting me select. We'll do the Yoshi Mobile and the egg. One of these keys should allow us. There we go. Okay, so L2 goes to full screen, and then R2 will switch between the two different screens. So that should make this pretty playable. So there's Mario Kart, guys. Joystick obviously did not exist, so I must use this instead. And strangely, I should be able to hop with that shoulder button. Okay, so I got that figured out. If you go into your settings with the button up top, we got to configure controls. You go down to right trigger right there. Go over, click it, and then hit your right trigger. Not sure why that was messed up, but it was indeed messed up. I keep trying to use the joystick, and now this is working just fine. I can slide and do whatever I want. This is running really, really well. If I can keep it on the screen. Sorry about that. This is absolutely fine. It's running perfectly. So let's try another DS game. Okay, so after that long intro, this text is so tiny. We're going to go down here and we're going to do save state so that if we ever wanted to jump back into this, we don't have to do all that again. But as you can see there, guys, it is running just fine, running full speed. DS, I think, is going to be absolutely fine as long as you can play it like this primarily with one screen and you don't need a lot of touch screen input. Let's push the Nintendo 64 emulation probably to its limits with Perfect Dark. I don't have high hopes that this is going to work very well, but we're going to find out. And we are running in slow motion. And it actually just reset. So Perfect Dark was just not going to happen. So we're going to try Super Smash Bros., another game that tends to push these things fairly hard. We'll see what this is able to do. Definitely got some slowdown here. There it is. So it seems to me that N64 is going to be one of those situations where it's going to be game by game. Some games are going to run kind of rough. They're close, but not quite there. The simpler games are going to be the ones you're going to be able to play on this device. Let's move on and check out some PlayStation 1. This is one of my wife's favorite games, Tomb Raider. And I think it ought to run pretty darn well. These emulators tend to handle PlayStation a bit better than they do in 64. Let's jump ahead until we get to some gameplay. I actually thought I was selecting the original Tomb Raider, and this is in fact Tomb Raider Chronicles, which I don't think I've ever played before, but we'll just try it anyways, and you can see here, it's running just fine. Let me get into like a brighter area if I can. Yeah, seems like it's running pretty much flawless. Look at that jump. Like it was an old trick, something I've done a million times. All right, so this is one of my childhood favorites, Spyro the Dragon. And as you can see, we are running absolutely flawlessly. So pretty safe assumption here. PlayStation 1 is going to be A-OK. Honestly, this looks really good too. Let's check out some Dreamcast here with Crazy Taxi. All right, the trigger to go. I mean, honestly, guys, this is running pretty well too. I don't think every Dreamcast game is going to be like picture perfect on here, but Crazy Taxi's doing all right. And I can feel the vibration motor doing its thing too. I know I'm supposed to pick up a customer, but I'm busy. I'm doing something. Hop in. I will say that the joystick being so small is a little bit of a problem because you can't really turn like small amounts just because the stick is really, really small. There's just not a lot of room to work there. But yeah, hey, I think you're going to be able to play some Dreamcast on this thing, guys. All right, so in terms of raw game performance, it's a little hit and miss. N64 is kind of okay, but a lot of games are just not going to be playable. The games I kind of want to play, it's just not fast enough to run these games. PlayStation seems totally fine, and Dreamcast actually seems more fine than not. I don't have a big Dreamcast catalog to test, but what I've looked at has ran surprisingly well. Of course, all the retro stuff, the older stuff, which is actually really what I mostly play on these things, going to be absolutely fine. Game Boy Advance games, stuff like that, it's going to run them with no trouble at all. The biggest problem that I had with this thing is that in the middle of me testing it, my SD card corrupted itself, and I had to spend a pretty good amount of time in my afternoon fixing this thing. I'll have a video up already about fixing that, so if you want to know what happened there, you can watch that video, or if that maybe that's happened to you on a similar device, the steps will be pretty much the same. You can check that out as well. So guys, that is the Anbernic RG35XX H. I think that it is decent. I do really like the form factor, right? I like the shape and size of it. But like a lot of these things, the software is just not great. It's okay. Not a ton of options. I'd love to see a custom firmware on this thing. And of course, the SD cards they ship with it are terrible and they are unreliable. I would not recommend playing for a long time on those cards because eventually there's a good chance you're going to lose your save. So all that being said, shout out to MechDOI for sending this thing over for me to review. As always, no money exchange hands for the production of this review, and they are watching it at the same time as you are. If you want to purchase this device, I'm going to drop an affiliate link in the description down below. Click it, make your purchase, and I will earn commission off of that. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more content like this, and until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.